Clean Cities partnered with the EV Club to do first responder training on EVs with the New Haven Fire Department. And with that, I'd like to turn the mic over to Representative Jonathan Steinberg.
I'd love to thank the mayor for hosting us. It's great to be in New Haven. This is where, as Bluto said in Animal House, I spent the best 6 years of my life. Though I will say, with the significant contingent from Westport and Fairfield, I've been trying to convince Bruce he needs to build another sustainable hotel in that area, so we have a shorter commute in the morning. You don't have to deal with it I-95. I suppose, as House Chair of the Energy and Technology Committee of the Legislature, I should be happy that everybody's talking about energy right now. But it's really not the right kind of conversation. Rather than just talking about the genuine pain of ratepayer rates, there are really serious policy-driven issues here in the state of Connecticut we all should be talking about, whether it's securing sufficient supply to meet our ongoing needs, and demand will only rise, and not just with EVs, but with data centers and other high energy demands. Maybe we should be a little more interested in things like offshore wind, but I'm not going to get into that today because I'm in enough trouble already. We can talk a lot about the need to expand and build out infrastructure, both for resilience of the existing grid, but also broadly to facilitate the sharing of the new renewable energy sources regionally. Something we really need to be focusing on the benefits. And one could argue that things like EV charging are critical to our concept of infrastructure now, and will be part of our future. And if we don't have a plan, and we're not prepared to implement that plan, it's not going to happen in the way that we intend. And we already are seeing that there are some dislocations that we maybe didn't anticipate. So, just sticking on the issue of price right now, my co-chair, the estimable Senator Norm Needleman, talks a lot about the three-legged stool. And that's a metaphor that works in a lot of contexts. In this case, we're talking about sort of the reliability, resilience is one of the legs of the stool. One, environmental responsibility and accountability, something we all care about, is the second leg. And price and costs are definitely a third leg. But the whole concept of the three-legged stool is that if one of these legs gets outsized or the like, you don't have a stable stool. You have an unbalanced environment. And I think we experienced that after Superstorm Sandy. Suddenly we realized that resilience was not a given, and that unless we took charge, that we couldn't guarantee the utilities were necessarily looking out for our interests. That's what led to the Take Back Our Grid Act, that led to SB 7, and it's led to a slew of dockets that PURA is currently looking at, which will define our energy future. And so, as much as I have sympathy, and I always will for people who are struggling to pay their bills, I'm hoping we're going to have a broader conversation. So, I guess you're wondering, here I've been talking for a while, what does this have to do with introducing Chair Marissa Gillett? Well, I'll get to that. I'm going to make a segue here. Because in my mind, PURA is really all about striking that balance, looking out for our interests in a variety of ways, and doing the hard work, which we dilettante legislators are really not prepared to do, which is, we have a gleam in our eye, we have this broad, good intention, this concept of how things should go, and even deep, they have programs and the like, they're setting policy, but let's be straight. We're not going to get done here in the state of Connecticut without PURA, and not just having PURA, but a strong, dedicated, focused PURA, if we're going to achieve all of our goals. And that brings me to my friend, Marissa Gillett, who, frankly, is unique to my experience. And it's a rare pleasure that one gets to introduce one of one's heroes. I have referred to her as a unicorn. I don't know if necessarily that's something you want to hear that often, but everybody likes unicorns. So really. nothing wrong with that. But she brings a truly unique skill set and perspective that should be the envy of every other state in the nation. And in fact, we are and should be an example to others. And if we stay the course, I fully expect other states to follow our example. She brings a unique combination of being both a lawyer and an engineer. That's a very scary combination to me. But when we talk about having requisite skills to do a very complicated job, we could not have a better representative. What she learned in Maryland set her up to believe there was more than one way for a regulatory authority to achieve the ends on behalf of the citizens of that state. And she brought from Maryland to Connecticut that possibility. And we'll take some small credit in the legislature. We did pick up on it. We have partnered. We do believe in the vision. But it has, as I'm sure all of you are aware, come at a bit of a cost. We live in a world in which people are very forthright. Some people are well over the top. And to be bold, to be consistent and courageous in this environment is hard. We're all prepared for some measure of slings and arrows, but unfortunately, PURA in general and Chair Gillett in specific has been a target of, frankly, some unfortunate ways of expressing differences of opinion. And through it all, whether wise or otherwise, she has remained steadfast to the goals that we have. There's a lot of talk about the accountability side of things. Ever since Superstorm Sandy, hold the utilities accountable. Make sure we're getting fair value, that what they're doing is prudent and reasonable. It's created a bit of tension. But I would have you focus on really the more important part of what PURA does, which is the seemingly endless list of dockets that cover the entire waterfront. Everything that matters to our energy future, believe it or not, even if you're not paying attention, is being addressed by PURA. Everything that we care about, and particularly EVs, is part of the portfolio of things that they're not merely talking about. They're researching, they're talking to all the players, and they're helping us come up with practical, actionable solutions to the things that we know we have to address if we're going to be competitive as a state and as a country. We are very fortunate to have somebody who's prepared to work, I think, more hours than there are in a day and still have to take care of her family and other things, and have an incredibly dedicated staff who all are all in on working so hard to make a lot of these things possible. But it should give you all a tremendous measure of relief and pride that Connecticut potentially can be on the right path, that we can achieve our energy goals, we can remain a player, even though we have many challenges, not the least of which are the high cost of energy in our state. But, as you'll see in her presentation, she takes the most complicated subjects, things that I've been on the Energy Committee for 14 years, I still don't understand, and she can reduce them, distill those complicated things to something we can all understand. And that's not what lawyers usually do, or engineers, frankly. They make things more complicated. They don't. But if you've ever been the beneficiary of one of her PURA 101 presentations, you can actually understand what they do. You can actually understand how important the work is that they do. And I could go on and on. I treasure having a partner such as Chair Gillett when we're trying to decide how we're supposed to move the ball forward. It is a successful relationship. We all have our lanes to stay in because we care about doing the right thing. And with all the other things that can happen in this environment, all the hate stuff, PURA's had thousands of, we're going to get you kind of things, which are just not productive. We are actually still going to make this happen because of Chair Marissa Gillett. And I will, as I say, I can wax ecstatic indefinitely, but I will turn it over to Marissa and just in advance, thank her and thank her team for everything they do on behalf of the people of the state of Connecticut.
are my daughter's favorite thing right now, so I'm going to hold on to that comparison well into her teen years, and hopefully she'll stay with me there. Thank you so much to all the conference organizers for having my team and I here this morning. Really looking forward to the conversations that continue after my talk this morning, as well as well into the future. So as has been said, my name is Marissa Gillett. I have been the chair of the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, or PURA, for a little over 5 years now, hoping to continue for another couple of years. Wood, is this wood? This looks like composite. Well, that'll have to do. So we'll get right into it.
Just you tap your finger, and slide over.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I just wanted to open up with a little bit of introduction to PURA, although my guess is if I had to do a survey of who has heard of PURA at this point, everybody in this room might raise your hand. But PURA does a lot more than you've seen us in the news for as of recently. Our bread and butter are, of course, the rate cases, which set rates for the distribution utility companies, which is actually not what we've been in the news for recently. But in addition to that, we have broad jurisdiction over investor-owned utilities in the electric, water, and gas space. And so we're going to pause here and make sure you understand what I mean by investor-owned utilities, because that's going to be the basis of what I'm going to talk to you about this morning. These are utilities that have shareholders. So if you are served by an electric, gas, or water affiliate that is owned and operated by a municipality or an electric co-op, we have several in the state, those do not fall under the jurisdiction of PURA. And that's really for a simple reason. When these utilities were created as monopoly ventures, over a century ago, there was a need to create a version of PURA in every state. Every state has one. They're called public service companies, public utility commissions, and our role is really to step in where the private market otherwise would. So if you think about any other competitive service that's provided, they get a lot of checks on their rates and what they can charge and their profit simply by the fact that they have competitors. In this space, the utilities that we regulate do not have natural competitors for everything except supply on the electric side, which is a bit of a tangent. But on a day-to-day basis, in terms of regulating these utilities, that can involve a lot more than setting just their distribution rates, which happens every 4 to 10 years. So on a day-to-day basis, we're taking up other issues that affect your daily life. They can look like mergers and acquisitions when these companies are bought. It can look like consumer outreach and education. We do a lot of licensing efforts. And more recently, we've been very focused on programs that are meant to modernize the grid, including our light-duty electric vehicle charging program, which I'll talk to you about this morning. So sometimes it's easier to talk about what we don't do than what we do. So even though we have some light regulation of telecom in our space, we do not regulate the internet, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your viewpoint. Other things on this list that you might think of, we don't regulate propane or heating oil. We also currently do not license solar companies. There's a lot of other things on this list that you might have thought through, cable TV rates. We do maintain relationships with a lot of the Comcasts of the world, so we always invite people to call our 4-person call center. If you heard Rep. Steinberg refer to the thousands of complaints we've received over the past 2 months, we have 4 people that address those. But we do welcome you to call with questions. So right now there are 4 commissioners of PURA. My title is chairman. That basically means that if you're familiar with the setup of a first selectman versus selectwoman, I'm more akin to the first selectman of PURA. I set our agenda. I provide direction to our staff. But when it comes to voting on a matter, we all have equal votes. In fact, I am often, not often, although recently, on the losing end of some of these votes. So it's really a matter of all of us coming together. More times than not, we do reach agreement or compromise. And as I said, right now there are 4 of us. In 2023, just to give you some perspective before I get into more of what we do, we had 17,000 customer complaints and inquiries. We also have a division of staff that's focused on regulating the gas pipelines in the state from a safety perspective. So we do a lot of on-field, on-site inspections that result in a lot of violations and civil penalties. We also have, as was alluded to this morning, at any given time, we have between 80 and 100 active dockets. If you're familiar with how a court is set up, PURA is like a quasi-judicial agency, and all of our work is done through a docket, which is synonymous with a proceeding or a case. So before I close out the presentation, I'll give you some tips and tricks on how to track dockets that you may be interested in and how to get involved in those. Because by the end of this presentation, I'm hoping to convince you that it's critical to engage with us, not just from time to time, but all the time. All right, so to focus on our efforts and how they overlap with what you're interested in. In 2019, when the governor recruited me from Maryland, it was specifically because of work that I had done in Maryland on modernizing the grid. And one of the programs that I launched there was replicated here as our light-duty electric vehicle charging program. So Connecticut, in many ways, had a lot of catching up to do. And when we looked around with my staff at the time, the question was, well, how are we going to do that? There's so much to do at the time, and unfortunately still, we do not have advanced metering infrastructure deployed in the majority of the state, whereas in the rest of the country, and in fact, when I was on staff at the Maryland Commission, we ordered the deployment of smart meters in 2008. So we looked around and said, okay, well, there's an infinite number of things that can be done to modernize the grid. Where are we going to start? We literally whiteboarded it out, and I had 33 tracks, my staff wanted 4. We settled on 11, which I thought was a fair compromise, although many have been added since. And we named it the Equitable Modern Grid Initiative. If you haven't heard of the Equitable Modern Grid Initiative to date, that's unfortunate because I think a lot of the conversations over the last year, particularly with some failed efforts regarding adoption of certain regulations that you may have been interested in, a lot of the questions that I heard that were posed had answers, and the answers lie in a lot of the dockets that we've already concluded. A plan is only as good as the number of people who know about it, though, and so it needs you, I'm urging everyone in here to take something away from this presentation, and if you can't recall what the answer is, at least know that there's a plan out there. And it's called the Equitable Modern Grid. The 4 objectives on the screen were what we decided these 11 tracks were going to center around, and they may seem at times to be in conflict with each other. And what we do through these programs is figure out how each of those objectives weigh against each other when designing these programs. So the one of the 11 tracks, the 4th one to be specific, resulted in the creation of Connecticut's first ever light-duty electric vehicle charging program. So there's been a lot of talk about what the impetus was for this program, and many of you may know that the state has been active in this space for a number of years, including by signing on to a multi-state memorandum of understanding a number of years ago. And in that document, it set forth that Connecticut was going to transition a certain number of its light-duty cars to electric by 2030. There's also a lot of tools out there already, including there's a national laboratory that's stood up by the U.S. Department of Energy that provides free tools that allow you to convert the vehicles into a number of charging points that are needed to support that. And so we got to, I replicated the same process I had done in Maryland. We used this tool to translate a number of cars into charging stations that the state needed. Now, we didn't say that the state government or ratepayers were going to be responsible for 100% of this. No, because I think it's important to recognize that the private market should be expected to catch up at some point, and we should be concentrating our resources in the underserved areas and markets across the state. So what we did was say, well, we're going to target half of what is needed in terms of charging infrastructure, and we're going to do it over 9 years in 3-year program cycles. And so what you can see on the screen is the calculation of the charging infrastructure by market segment that is needed to reach Connecticut's share of electrification by 2030. So these programs are somewhat infamously administered by electric utility companies, Eversource and United Illuminating, who are the 2 electric utilities that we regulate. We oversee the progress of these programs through an annual program review, which I'll talk a little bit more about. It also includes some rate design options. So in designing this program, what we did was what we have to do in every single program, which is you must strike a balance between what you're funding for individual ratepayers versus what the grid as a whole and what non-participating ratepayers are getting. And the output of that are the incentives that you can see on the screen. So if you're familiar with the energy efficiency space, there are a number there's like 6, I think at this point, of cost-benefit tests that can be used, and they assume different viewpoints. And so in designing this program, we assumed the viewpoint in various instances of the utility, of a non-participating ratepayer, of a participating ratepayer. So you can run these calculations to make sure that the incentive level that you're offering is yielding net benefits to each of those groups. And that's largely how we ended up with these rebates that you can see on the screen. They have been tweaked from time to time. One of the most important parts of our Equitable Modern Grid initiative is it's designed to be living. So some of the 100 dockets that we have open at any given point are our suite of annual program reviews. So before we close out today, I'll make sure you understand docket numbers because I'm really interested in you all participating in our annual reviews moving forward. But part of the living and breathing aspect of this program is that we do have the option to adjust upwards or downwards these rebates and eligible incentive adders if we're trying to deploy infrastructure in a specific type of community moving forward. So specifically underserved or low-income disadvantaged communities, we can kick on an additional adder if we're seeing under-deployment in those areas. Oh, did that again. All right, so you're probably wondering, well, how are we doing to date? This program launched January 1st of 2022. I will say, despite some interruptions, unfortunate interruptions earlier this year, the latest data is showing that we are making pretty notable progress so far. Just under 10,000 ports deployed under this program statewide. And most importantly, in my opinion, 31% of those ports have been deployed in a statutorily defined underserved community. When we stood up these programs, we baked in the Justice 40 targets, which if you're not familiar under legislation that's been passed at the federal level, 40% of the incentives that are available under the IRA, Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, are trying to be targeted to underserved communities. And we carried that down into all of our programs and make sure to adjust our incentives each year if we're seeing ourselves fall short of that goal. So in this instance, we are 9% short of our goal. So we have taken action to tweak some of those adders in underserved communities. In addition to the light duty fleets that we are working, targeting through these programs, we have also dipped our toes in the medium to heavy duty space. We have a docket that we initiated a few years ago now that has been kind of slow burning, but there's still plenty of runway for y'all to get involved. There's a lot of opportunity in the medium to heavy duty space, and with opportunity come a lot of barriers and challenges. So what we didn't talk about so far is why PURA is playing in this space, and I think it's even more transparent and vital why, and you can understand it even more in the medium to heavy duty space than you can in the light duty space. There's been a lot of talk in the media and the news about allegations that these incentives are going to certain areas or certain populations. And the thing that you must understand about these programs, in my opinion, is that absent these programs, there are a lot of costs that the grid would incur and all ratepayers would incur absent these programs. So through these programs, we can attach conditions to the receipt of the funds, and we have attached conditions, particularly in the light duty, which is formalized. So one of the most important things that you can do to optimize the grid is both the location of these chargers as well as the time of day that folks are charging, which is not news to most or all of you in this room. But what individuals do, whether they're businesses that have taken these funds or individuals, they are being automatically enrolled in these managed charging programs as a condition of receiving those funds. So we're getting in the door, getting them used to having the utilities control their usage in particularly challenging times of the day. And that's what we're hoping to replicate in the medium to heavy duty space as well. Another docket that has some implications to this space is our Innovative Energy Solutions program. It's the 5th track of the Equitable Modern Grid. I've heard it described, and I've described it myself, as a bit like a regulatory sandbox. It allows you to pilot concepts in concert with the utilities. And one of our earlier rounds is in the middle of deploying a vehicle to grid solution for electric school buses. So I'm running short on time, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about performance-based regulation and how we're pulling electric vehicles into this space as well. So historically, across the country, across the world, utilities are regulated through traditional cost of service regulation. And performance-based regulation, rather than, how do I describe PBR in 10 seconds? Rather than compensate a utility simply for the capital that it's putting into the ground, PBR seeks to direct a utility to modify the services it provides and the capital it deploys in service of specific outcomes. And so we have identified in draft form, well, we've adopted the goals for PBR that are on the screen, and specific to this conversation, you can see some customer empowerment ones, which we have said can be partially realized through recognition of our electric vehicle programs. So right now, before PURA, we have some of these proceedings open that are looking at establishing performance incentive mechanisms, metrics, scorecards. The one on the screen is a draft component of that we've set out around driving managed charging. So this is just an example of how we're trying to pull in different components of our Equitable Modern Grid into PBR, which is really seeking to change the way we regulate utilities overall. So as promised, I want to finish by talking about how you can engage with PURA. Hopefully I've convinced you that at a minimum you should be paying attention to our light duty EV programs moving forward. But you're welcome to show up in any and all of the dockets that we have. You can provide live comments during a public comment hearing, or you can provide those comments in writing by emailing the executive secretary, or you can move to formal intervention in a docketed proceeding, which is sometimes as scary as it sounds, but not always. So let me talk to you about that. So we have a live calendar of events. You can sign up for email notifications to learn about our dockets. Anyone who's dabbled in PURA world knows that we have a somewhat infamous 1980s case management database system, screenshots on the screen. We do have a tutorial on our YouTube channel that walks you through how to navigate our system, if that's of help. But circling back to that intervention question, so we have a brand new program. It launched January 1st of this year, known as the Stakeholder Compensation Program. So this is in recognition of the fact that sometimes, particularly in the really nitty-gritty rate case proceedings before us, and even in some of these grid modernization proceedings, it's in recognition of that the average ratepayer, the average group can't go toe-to-toe with the utilities, frankly, that are appearing before us in these dockets. So in partnership with the legislature through SB 7, we received, which is codified as Public Act 23102, we received permission to stand up this program. It allows stakeholder groups, if you're representing a small business, if you're representing a financial hardship community, if you're representing an environmental justice community, it can provide up to $100,000 for your group per proceeding, up to three groups per proceeding, up to $1.2 million per year. And that money can be used for a wide range of things, from hiring an expert witness to advocate on your behalf, an attorney, really anything that can be cited as having provided a meaningful contribution to PURA's decision-making process. So do you have questions? I have some additional slides about some reports that we put out that are available. Somewhere in here I thought I had slides. We have made every effort to make PURA more transparent, to provide you access to what we're doing. If you have not signed up for our quarterly newsletters, that is the best opportunity to figure out which of the 80 to 100 dockets you are interested in. They come out every quarter. They do a backwards look and provide some summaries of dockets that have recently concluded. They also do a forward look into dockets that will be active in the upcoming quarter by sector, and they provide a list of public engagement opportunities. They also culminate in an annual report that we put out. So really hoped to see you engage in some of our dockets in writing, intervening, and open to any questions, or if you'd like to hold questions until after the Consumer Council, up to you. Take questions.
We have a few minutes.
Okay, great. Well, I can open it up to questions. Sir.
Hey, I'm Phil Herder, down from Hartford, and we've been in touch through the email. Let's see, definitely excited about the Equitable Modern Grid Initiative, and so, the goal is to just decarbonize as much as possible. We got a great example of a Future of Gas program in Massachusetts. So they were successful, but it's still a battle, to deal with stopping the pipelines that the companies want. So we have methane pipelines versus electrification. These are the tension. I would like to hold Eversource and UI accountable, right? And that, in fact, we diminish and shut down as many pipelines as possible, and essentially utilize IRA funding to help people to have zero emissions homes and a smart grid and all the rest. So anyway, it's a big topic, but definitely want to participate in any of the hearings that are coming up, so I'm going to be checking the schedule. Do you know of any ideas how we can kind of replicate what they've done in Massachusetts here in Connecticut?
There was a piece of legislation last session, HB 5004, that would have required PURA to undertake a future of natural gas study. It was not ultimately adopted, but certainly one path forward is to provide PURA that direction. PURA is a creature of statute, which means that we have to act on authority that is delegated to us from the legislature. So we often take our cues from the legislation that is passed or policy direction that is provided by DEEP. Other questions? Bruce.
We're fortunate at Marcel to have 26 EV chargers out in our parking lot. We have 26 EV chargers, 12 Tesla chargers that also serve other cars, and an additional 14 level 2 chargers, 4 of which are sort of the Tesla destination chargers, and another 10 of which are EV Connect network chargers. It would be very easy for us to taper down the amount of power they draw during peak hours, but I'm not aware of a program that we could even enroll in or any kind of incentives for commercial destination charging. And I'm wondering, is that in the offing, or is there a program I'm unaware of that would allow us to help the grid by signing up for that?
Not currently, although one segment of our established light-duty electric vehicle programs does provide destination and workplace incentives for deploying those. If you are interested in a program offering, this is a great example of something that could be brought to PURA through our annual review dockets. So the docket, so if you've seen our dockets, they're 2 numbers, -2 numbers, -2 numbers. The first 2 numbers are the last 2 digits of the year we're in. So currently our EV docket is 240806. It is always 0806 every year for electric vehicle infrastructure. So next year it'll be 250806. 08 stands for the month of August, which means that we generally kick off in or around the month of August. So what you could do is come to us in 250806. We're a little too far into the docket this year with a plan or a request. We do operate on evidentiary standards, which means we have to have substantial evidence to undertake anything that we're doing. So the more developed the offering, the better, and the earlier in the process we get it, the better. But that's a great example of something that you could bring to us in the future. Oh, there's so many. Sorry.
Hi, Steve Lewis, Sierra Club. So you talked about
your innovation sandbox and the vehicle to grid for school buses. When's that supposed to conclude? How's that going? And can you give an example of any other innovation things in the sandbox right now?
Sure. So I love this question. I didn't get to focus on it too much earlier. But it is modeled after the Silicon Valley fail fast mentality. So each pilot is eligible for up to $5 million in funding. The cycles kick off every January and are 18 to 24 months long. So they overlap a little bit. So the first cycle kicked off on January 1st of this year. So we're just a few months into it, and it's the first time we're through this cycle, so not many results to date. But the great thing about this program is it provides a path to scalability. So over the course of 18 to 24 months, as these programs hopefully hit their milestones, the vision is by the conclusion of this 18 to 24 month pilot, that they have demonstrated the value of their service, and PURA will then provide a pathway to scalability for all components of the grid where it could work. And for those of you that are developers in the room, you may know that the utility industry is one of the hardest to break into, particularly if you're not a known vendor. So the great thing about this program is it provides 3 pathways to engagement. So you can come in on your own as a developer, you can come in collaboration with the utility, or the utility can propose its own. And they're proposing something to what's called the Innovation Advisory Council, which allows us to partner with the Connecticut Green Bank, Connecticut Innovations. If you're not familiar with them, they're the state's venture capitalist arm. And we partner with the Office of Consumer Counsel, DEEP, others, and they essentially go through what's called a pitch fest. It looks a lot like Shark Tank, and they kind of narrow down. Each year has a different theme. So this year's theme is electrification, and some of the concepts that are pending in front of us look at, there's one in particular on the top of my head that looks at bringing in climate change factors in real time into utility resilience planning. Sir.
Hello, Thomas Kenny. I'm a technical salesperson, live in Hartford. Just had a question about like incentives because I'm in sales. I think it was a couple months ago we got emails from utilities about the rebate incentives going away, and it kind of helps when you have good incentives that are available, aside from the ITC, investment tax credit. Do you have an idea of when, you know, the residential and the commercial rebates will be back?
They should be back now, and if you are hearing otherwise, that is something that I need to hear directly. There was a dispute regarding cost recovery and how we are going to allow the utilities to recover these costs. That has been fully resolved. So those rebates should be live and available now. Sir,
So I'm here to play you off the stage after this.
please. I don't know.
No, you can just put that back.
Sir.
Elisha Jim Gozi, and I'm sales as well. My question is, when are you going to be able to incorporate the other municipalities that are not UI and Eversource, like Wallingford, Groton, and Norwich? I know there's a lot of customers there that are just frustrated at not being able to get EV or solar, and I've heard multiple complaints about not being able to get the incentives that everyone else in the state are.
Unfortunately, the answer to that is never, because I do not regulate them. So all of this comes back to my statutory jurisdiction, which is over investor-owned utilities only. So these programs are funded with ratepayer dollars from Eversource or UI, and that goes for all the programs that we oversee for solar EVs. So to the extent that Wallingford, Norwich, et cetera, would like to operate those programs themselves, it's up to their individual boards and municipalities.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We need a few minutes to set up for the next presentation, but with respect to incentives, so Eversource had threatened to suspend incentives, and then they told me, at least, that they never actually did. However, right, it doesn't really send a clear message to the consumer, but just a couple of things. Some of the smaller utilities on their own have implemented incentive programs. They don't look exactly like this. In fact, they usually, in one way, they're consumer friendlier because they tend to be very simple, right? We'll give you $500 for a charger or another $500 for the installation. So I know in Norwalk they had those, and I thought either in Groton or Norwich there was a program. So they do happen, and it's worth staying in touch with them. One thing that does happen with these incentives, Marissa displayed that grid that talked about the installations by category, but there's a pot of funding, and that can run out. So level 2 commercial is currently has filled the funding available, at least in this tranche. And I know at least Eversource is not taking applications at this point for DCFC projects for the time being. So we do still have to deal with that. Maybe some money could be brought forward. I don't know how you handle that.
There's always money floating around.
I also want to mention that for those who are interested in just information about vehicles, there's an information sheet. There's a pile of them on the table in the back. It's every battery electric vehicle currently for sale, the range, the price, the trim levels. It was prepared by the Greater Washington, D.C. chapter of the Electric Vehicle Association. So it came to me because I'm on the policy of the EVA. So we have some copies of that if you're interested. It's also posted on our website. And with respect to the question about availability of incentives, we always keep up with that, and that's also on our website, or you could just sign up for our distribution. So we have a few minutes, and then we'll turn the mic over to Claire Coleman from the Office of Consumer Counsel.